Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with WRAL's Travis Fain, we're talking about North Carolina's new abortion law. We're talking about 11th hour changes to the controversial legislation, what it says, when it takes effect, and the political controversy it has sparked. Travis, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
So we are recording this on Tuesday afternoon. This is going to post on Wednesday morning. And so this is just a moving target. This is changing every day. Tell me, first of all, what's happening in federal court regarding this.
So a federal judge will hear the start of a lawsuit today that alleges that this new abortion law, which doesn't actually go into effect until July 1, so over the weekend, whether or not it is constitutional. And what Planned Parenthood and some others have argued is a couple of things, but probably the key thing that we'll focus on is they say the bill as written, as passed into law, is so vague in some areas as to be unconstitutional. And a federal judge on Wednesday, so today probably as people are listening to this, will weigh that argument and decide whether or not to issue a temporary restraining order. So not deciding the whole case, but just deciding, well, do we let this become law and be implemented while this is being discussed in the federal courthouse, or do we say, no, we're going to keep the status quo, keep the law as it is. This isn't going to go into effect until the courts decide whether it's constitutional.
So let's back up a minute and explain how we got here. Most people, I'm sure, know that Roe v. Wade was overturned, so the states then get to decide this question for themselves. There was a lot of speculation in North Carolina about how things would go, but this was just introduced in May, correct? And then the process has gone really quickly. And
that was all purposeful from the Republican majority. There was a lot of arm twisting to get this bill, even though we have a Republican supermajority both in the House and the Senate. Not everyone agrees on, abortion is such a difficult issue, right? So there were people who wanted what's typically called a heartbeat bill, which is banning abortions typically after 5-6 weeks. They didn't get what they wanted, but then there were some more moderate Republicans who didn't want to go quite as far as this bill goes. So what came out the compromise is instead of a general ban after 20 weeks, it's generally a ban after 12 weeks with exceptions, rape, incest, life of the mother, your typical things. Almost more interesting to me than moving the line to 12 weeks is there are some new hoops you have to jump for to get an abortion at any time. And one of the most interesting ones is North Carolina has long had a 72-hour waiting period. But the way it worked is you had to have a phone conversation with your doctor 72 hours before an abortion. That now becomes in person. So to get an abortion in North Carolina, if this law is allowed to go in effect by the judge, will require an in-person visit to your doctor at least 72 hours before the abortion, and then you got to go back to have the abortion performed. Typically it's medical. They give you the pill. And then a third appointment is scheduled that you don't necessarily have to go to, but your doctor is required to schedule. So the argument is, well, if you're poor, if you have a full-time job, hourly, that you can't get off of, if you have other children, if you don't have transportation, if you live in an area without a clinic, how are you getting 2, maybe 3 separate times to a facility to get this abortion, and thus have you treated people differently? Like this won't affect the rich, but it would affect the poor even well before 12 weeks.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to talk about this more after the break. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. So the governor vetoed this, but obviously the GOP-led General Assembly was able to override the veto. And now we're hearing about, I guess, last-minute changes because it seemed like it was already kind of decided upon, and now this week there have been some changes.
That's right. Well, we talked about how quickly the original bill moved forward. I mean, it was revealed publicly, pre-negotiated, moved very quickly through the legislature, and Democrats at the time said, well, this isn't clear or this is a problem, and of course Democrats were against the bill in general because it's new restrictions on abortion. Then the federal lawsuit gets signed. So the bill goes into law over the governor's veto. The Republicans overturn that veto. Then the lawsuit is filed. And one of the things the lawsuit says is a bunch of parts are vague, nonsensical. And that's an argument that Planned Parenthood is making that a judge will have to sort out. But what happened last week was Republicans just kind of quickly introduced a 4-page bill that changes the original bill a bunch of different ways. And it's kind of hard to follow. Like you kind of have to be a lawyer to follow it. But it seems like a lot of what it changes is what's kind of targeted in the lawsuit. So The argument, it seems to be this is the Republican majority saying, all right, we want this bill to survive the lawsuit. Let's change it.
To make sure that it does.
Yeah, to try to almost like to moot the lawsuit. That's not exactly how it works. It's not that simple, but that appears to be what the effort is.
Is this 100% down party lines?
Yeah, it has been so far, I believe. Well, it's a little more complicated than that because the fixes to the abortion bill, for lack of a better word, were tacked into a broader bill that Governor Roy Cooper's Department of Health and Human Services actually wanted. So it's got all kind of stuff totally unrelated to the abortion bill. They stick the abortion fixes, again, for lack of a better word, into that. And so a bunch of Democrats voted for it. But on the abortion issue, yeah, it's been a party line.
And this is really, in a way, a political coup for Republican legislators. I mean, explain the political significance of this.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We did not abortion. So Roe v. Wade goes down last year, and we head into election season. And we did not see, although Democrats kind of hoped that they would do better in General Assembly elections, legislative elections, because people would be concerned about losing abortion rights. We just didn't see that. Republicans won statewide races. They won state Supreme Court races. They won local legislative races. And I don't know actually how much abortion does move the needle politically, although it could move it in some particular districts. I mean, we talked earlier about how some people wanted a heartbeat law, more restrictions. But if you're a Republican in a fairly swing district where 2 or 3% is going to decide the thing, you're in a suburban district maybe. I don't know how you vote for a heartbeat bill and then expect to get reelected. So it's kind of more at the margins that the political impact is likely to come. The big thing, though, in 2024, we've got a governor's race. So in addition to the legislature, you could have a Republican governor. If they're both controlled by Republicans, then the supermajority doesn't matter. All of a sudden, a lot more abortion laws are on the table. And a lot of Republican lawmakers have been very open about the fact that this is kind of the beginning. They would like to be more restrictive, but right now, politically, they can't.
Yeah. And I mean, what are you hearing from the lawmakers who support it, who don't support it? I mean, is it really just your basic arguments dealing with, when does life begin? And, the pro-life arguments we've heard before. And then, of course, the people who are supportive of allowing abortion are saying, hey, a woman has a right to make these choices.
Yeah, it's really close to as simple as abortion is murder versus abortion is health care. That the state has this need to step in. At some point, a fetus or, there are various stages of development. At some point, it becomes a child. At some point, it becomes a citizen worthy of the state's protection. And where is that point? And then on the other side, the argument is, look, a state legislature is not the place to decide whether or not I can have an abortion and when. That is a conversation between a woman, so me, a woman, and the doctor. It ain't about y'all, is the other side of that argument.
Right. So this is scheduled to take effect on Saturday, July 1, barring whatever happens in the courtroom. And from a practical standpoint, I mean, what does this mean for abortion providers in North Carolina? Are they going to be policed? Are they going to just say, you know what, we're going to close our doors? And as a result, will women seek abortions in other states?
A lot of them, they won't close their doors necessarily. There's a whole bunch of new rules for certain types of abortion facilities. And I felt they were really unclear as the bill was passed. And I was asking a lot of questions. And look, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. The rules for the width of hospital halls are not something I'm an expert on. But it looked to me as if the intent was to really require abortion clinics to come up to new standards. But it also looked to me like those standards were going to be set at a later date by a commission appointed by Governor Roy Cooper, who's a Democrat. So you would not expect them to press these facilities into closing. But Planned Parenthood, which operates most of the abortion clinics in the state, said that it could potentially force them to close. So there were a lot of questions. So exactly what happens it is hard to say, but I think it's something that'll play out over time.
It's developing, absolutely. Well, Travis, thank you so much for breaking this down for us and for bringing us up to date. And I know you and your team will continue to follow this. If you're listening to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL app, You can also find it in any podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, pretty much anywhere podcasts live. You'll find more episodes of the WRAL Daily Download. As always, thanks again for listening.